Hi everyone, it's Christian Girl Kelly, and I have a question for you today. Do you have protection? Do you use protection? Right, this is a question that probably you have heard of because it's very common in our society. Do you have protection? Did you use protection? Do you keep protection on you? Right, this is something that we hear all the time. And typically, where does our mind go? It goes to the sexual realm, right? The idea is that we need to put up some kind of barrier or border or introduce something that is going to keep us from any particular consequence that we don't want, any repercussion that we're not looking for. We're going to go in willingly and try to protect ourselves from that thing. The same thing happens within culture and many other aspects. So, what do we like to protect? We like to protect our bodies, right? We like to protect our possessions. People have home insurance. Why? Because if something happens to their home, a burglar, or if there's some kind of weather, they can make a claim and get a reimbursement or get a percentage of all that back because they have insurance. They're protecting themselves. And then, of course, we have insurance, health insurance. We want to protect ourselves. We have these systems so that if something happens to us, we can present a card and they will say, okay, you have protection for this. We can cover you. This is your percentage, right? We are always trying to protect things like our borders. This is a conversation that happens a lot, especially now across many different nations. They're talking about protecting their borders. What does that typically mean? That means that people sit around in a room or on a conference call and they talk about all the policies that should be in place so that people in their country or within their borders, that they are distinguished from those who are outside of those borders. So they're being protected in some way, right? We use this language all the time, but what does it really mean? Now, throwing up walls, throwing up barriers, and there are many barriers, right, that we talk about. Does that really protect us? Are we really protected? Well, it's hard to talk about because a lot of us don't live in cities that are bordered by walls. Unless you live in a place like Segovia, or you live somewhere around the Great Wall of China, or you live somewhere else in the world that has a city that is pretty much bordered totally by a wall. We don't think about those, and we don't really know exactly what they have. So think about a wall, a barrier, protection, protecting oneself. In ancient olden days, right, the idea was that you threw up this border, but you just couldn't have a barrier protection. You just don't have protection in terms of a wall, barrier, system. You have to have the right watchman. And what was the purpose? There's always a watchtower. There was always a watchtower on these border walls. And what was the purpose? The watchman was the person who looked around, searching all around, north, south, east, west, to make sure that there was not an enemy approaching. And when there was an enemy approaching, what did the watchman do? Sound the alarm. That means the cavalry was coming. That means that those who are archers, they were coming with their bow and arrows. They were ready. That means if it was at a time where there were rifles, they got their rifles together. That means they got their foot soldiers together. If there was a body of water, they got their naval forces together. They were ready to fight. Okay? But you need that watchman, because with just the border, really wouldn't do anything, right? They see the border and then they climb over it, or they hack through it, or blow it away. You need a watchman. And who is the watchman? Well, the watchman, the best protection, the best barrier is the Lord. So I'm going to share with you a scripture. And the scripture is coming from Psalm 127:1. And it says, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. And unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen watch in vain. What does that mean? You have a lot of things that you're trying to protect. You have all different types of protection that you use to make sure that you are staying from a particular consequence. But If it's not without the Lord, if it's not with His power, with His grace, with His blessing, you're doing it for nothing. There is no profitability in putting up barriers and protections and walls when they're not going to be effective, when there's no true safety in it. And it's something that, we don't even really talk about. We think that some things that we deal with are the best way to go about them. We think that we have the best plan, the best barrier, the best protection, but then we wonder why some of these things don't end up working at the end of the day. We all know stories of things that were put up in the name of having protection and that weren't really useful when it was time to use them, when they really need to work. Somehow they failed us. How did they fail us? Oh, well, it's not 100%. Oh, well, you have this clause, which is a loophole. Oh, well, actually, it's only meant to be used for this amount of time, or there's an expiration date on it, something, right? There's always some type of excuse when it doesn't work. It wasn't the best protection. So I will tell you a story. I was on dorm duty. So if you've watched my first video, you know that I work at a boarding school, which means that the large majority of our students live here on campus. And as adults, we have to make sure that we care for them, and there are always adults in the dorms with them. So it was my weekend last weekend, which means that I was on duty both Friday and Saturday night. And of course, the students don't have classes the next night, so on Saturday or Sunday, so the students can stay out later, which means I'm out really late. But the idea is that we're talking to the students, and what I typically do, there's always some kind of food, some snack around, to invite them in. People love snacks, people love food, and there's always some walking up and down the stairs, looking around. And really, I'm just checking on them. How was your day? How was your week? What are you up to today? You have any plans? Do you have a lot of homework? Are you going to the dance? Are you going, out in the area to do some nature walk or whatever it might be? But I'm also watching to make sure that they are in a good state of health. Whether they're happy, whether they're adjusting, whether they're sleeping, all of these things as a watchman or watchwoman, I'm looking. But outside of that physical, that barrier, that protective mode that I'm in, I have a spiritual duty from the Lord to protect. And of course, I don't force this on anyone. In my time with them, I'm watching. I'm there to protect. And in my own quiet personal time to myself, I'm protecting in this way. I'm protecting with my prayers. Because I know that if the Lord is not standing watch over my girls, I'm in the girls' dorm. If He's not standing watch over them, it can go haywire. If He's not standing watch over me, it can go haywire. But if He is, that's the true protection. That's the true watching. That's the true barrier that I need and that they need. And I wouldn't push it on them. This is something I do in my private time, my personal time. But I pray over them in the whole night, in the whole dorm, and every weekend and every day that I have to be in there. I look at it as an opportunity to bring in the type of watchman, the type of watchwoman, the type of protection that we all truly need. Because without it, we're just spinning ourselves in circles. It's not really protection at all. So that's it. I hope that you like, that you subscribe, that you share, and I'll see you next time. It's Christian Girl Kelly.